I did that for such a long time that it's interesting how much the body can actually take. And
right.
How much during the progression, how you slowly get not just more dependent, but you need more and more to find those feelings. I was never counting the amount of pills, but they were enough to kill a horse. And I wasn't in a competition with it. I was just trying to feel what was going on. I'm like, okay, so when do you want to go? And he said 2 words that I could not understand. He said, right now. I could not process what the hell this guy was saying. What about the dog? And my wife was like, we walk the dog. I'm like, what about the baby? And it's a very humbling experience when everybody in your life loves you so much that they say they don't want you in your life anymore and it's taken care of. Once you start debating and you start negotiating it, good luck. I can start way below 0. I don't care where to start, but you gotta be with me. I don't want to sell you.
Yeah.
I don't want to sell you. You gotta want this because we're gonna take the journey together.
Welcome to the Why Intervention Podcast. I am your host, Christopher Doyle, today joined by Adam Jablin. Adam is a motivational speaker and high-level coach for individuals, corporations, even sports teams. He's the author of the best-selling book, Lotsaholic, has been featured in Forbes, Business Insider, and Thrive Global, to name a few, and more recently is the creator of the Hero Project. And he's a man with over 18 years sober. That's why I'm real happy to have him here. We're going to talk about all the things. Adam, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Christopher, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
So what's home base now for you?
South Florida, Boca Raton, Florida.
Okay. You're in Florida now. Were you out in California for a time?
No, I do a lot of work out west, but no, I just have a lot of family, clients, and business on the West Coast.
Got it. Okay. So let's go back to New Jersey. I grew up in New York, and so I know that you're a Jersey native.
Yeah, man. Tenafly, New Jersey, right by the George Washington Bridge. Yeah.
Okay. So what was life like for Adam in his teenage years out in New Jersey?
Well, I actually was in Boca Raton during my teenage years.
Oh, okay.
My roots are in Jersey. As a matter of fact, I'm still close to majority of the friends I grew up with. It was a really special time in the 80s in Jersey. And the whole town was like a community. And it was just an amazing time. You were on your bicycles all day and, you came home when the sun was going down and there was a lot of trust, and it was before 9/11. So everything, America just felt safe and free. And it was just a really special time. It was a really special time.
So when did you leave Jersey and go down to Florida? How old were you?
Right around 11, 12 years old. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Had you ever taken any substances or anything like that when you were in Jersey at that age, or?
No. The core issue from being the kid in Jersey was I was the fat kid. I was the heavy kid. There was a movie in the 80s called The Goonies, and this kid was called Chunk, and everyone would have me do the Chunk shuffle. And so I became very much an extrovert, and the idea was to please laugh with me and not laugh at me. A lot of people-pleasing skills, a lot of reading rooms, and always kind of being on guard, and the life of the party and the class clown, which was the beginning of some of those feelings I wanted to heal with substances.
Right. When you went down to Florida, did you have some kind of feeling of, I am never going to be the fat kid ever again?
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Moved down, it was 6th grade. And it was hot here and humid, and you could always have your shirt off and always be in the pool and always by the beach. And I would wear a t-shirt. It would suck to my fat. I would be embarrassed. And, I'm going through those interesting puberty years where you start getting testosterone, you're sweating and smelling. I just remember that I just made a decision. Like I don't even know how to describe it, except it really helped me when it came to the 12-step process of making a decision. But I just remember I'm not going to look and feel like this anymore. And my mom started buying me Flex magazine and Muscle and Fitness magazine. And they bought me a Weider weight set and Arnold Schwarzenegger's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. It was way before today's generation with apps and nutrition. And you just kind of had to do your research. And I started training every day, and we stopped going to McDonald's and getting my 6-piece chicken McNuggets, fries, and a Coke. And my mom would just make me grilled chicken and apples. And in 4 short years, I went from being the fattest kid in the class to the best built kid in the class. And I went from everyone asking me, yo, man, how many Oreos did you eat last night? To, hey, how much can you bench press? And the girls liked me. So I was right. I was right. Everything on the outside changed. Everything on the outside changed but me. I was still that insecure, class clown, people pleasing, laugh with me, don't laugh at me kid inside. But with the muscles and now the muscles and the coordination, I was able to play and hang with the older kids. And back then, there was just something cooler about older kids. It's just difficult to explain. They got their cars quicker. They had more permission. They stayed out later. They knew the cooler music. And I loved hanging with these guys. And these guys were experimenting. There's no other way to word it. And there was no peer pressure. They just passed whatever it was, if it was a 40 or a Coors Light and Christopher, I drank it and it fixed something inside of me I didn't know was broken, man. It just fixed it. And that class clown, insecure, fearful, laugh with me out, that guy his voice just went down. And I didn't become cocky or arrogant but confident, just confident. And it was like, I was so disassociated that I remember actually like looking at my physique being like, whoa, who is this? Who am I? You know what I mean? Like everything, it became like a superpower because all the anxiety and all of the fear and all the worries just got down to a zero and I could come out. Superman was here. So I chased that feeling with everything I had.
Right. Yeah, you would think, from a logical perspective that if you fix your outsides, chances are your insides will just get fixed magically as well, but it doesn't always work that way.
Not for me.
Yeah. And so when you went down there, and it's interesting, so you make a decision and you actually follow through, you accomplish that goal. Yeah. And yet it doesn't solve that internal thing that's happening. Right. That feeling like, not comfortable in your own skin, not even comfortable in this great, the physique now, and needing some kind of external thing. And I'm sure in your travels, you've seen the difference in that experience for you versus other people that don't have that issue get solved by substances.
100%. Yeah. 100%. And I didn't really know about alcoholism and addiction. And in my mind, until I was 30 years old, 29 at least, I didn't meet the description of what I had labeled as an alcoholic and an addict. Because in my mind, an alcoholic is a bum in Manhattan that hasn't showered in 2 years, that's mumbling to himself with a brown paper bag and petting a cat that's not there. And an addict is somebody, like Chris Rock's Pookie in New Jack City, just rail thin, needles in his arms, hasn't seen the bright of day. Yeah, so my definitions of what an alcoholic and addict was didn't meet what I was just an all-in party guy. It wasn't until I learned about the disease of alcoholism and addiction that I really understood that I am an alcoholic.
Yeah. So when you were in your prime, let's say, and I mean prime usage, right? Everything's humming. You're doing great. Everything on the outside looks good. You got businesses humming, girls are humming, all this stuff is going well. What does morning to night look like as far as your substance use?
Well, so you got to remember my vanity and my body was still a big part of the image. It was my mask that kept you away from hurting me and safe. So I would wake up somewhere between 5 and 5:15 in the morning and take some sort of amphetamine, be it Adderall or Ritalin or ephedrine at the time with coffee. And I would start sweating the night out from before. And even my face that was bloated from all the booze would actually the sweat would start coming down. So I would do an hour of cardio. And then after that, my chest would be beating literally my heart would be beating out of the chest. So I would take a couple of Xanax to calm that down. And I was living on prescription pills, drugs, and alcohol. So my body couldn't break down food. So I was living on bodybuilding supplements, either like some sort of metric shake or lean body shake or protein bars. I couldn't break down food anymore. And during the business day, as things would progress, either if I was getting very anxious or if I need more concentration, I would start being the pharmacist and either take something to concentrate more or something to calm me down. And I was never counting the amount of pills, but they were enough to kill a horse. And I wasn't in a competition with it. I was just trying to heal what was going on. Let's say the peak is, let's say, after I had, rather than just the fun times to make it sound like a college story, let's say I had my daughter, business is doing really well. So I would go to the gym at noon after, I got to the office very early, and because I wanted to be home with her at night. And again, I would take some form of a pre-workout that had a lot of stimulants in it, and then take a Xanax after, and maybe even some vodka, hoping nobody would smell it. Right around 5 or 6, I would get in the car and go to the gas station, and then I'd whack back on my way home about 6 beers very quick with mouthwash there, rinse my mouth out with mouthwash, brush my teeth, praying that my wife doesn't smell it. Hopefully I get away with murder. Try to act like a loving husband, try to act like a loving father. Well, I was a loving and doting father, but I try to act the part of a responsible loving and doting father, and then can't wait for those two to go to bed. And then when they go to bed, I can finally drink the way I want to drink. And it was on. It was just, you name it, I was drinking. And I was drinking to pass out, or I was drinking as much as I could to feel that feeling of wasted. And then I would probably pop another Xanax and Ambien to sleep and do the whole thing over again. Wake up early, take an amphetamine. And that was my routine, and usually somewhere in that week, I would find a sauna or something like that to just sweat all the toxins out, just sweat it all out, just to give that appearance and pretend like I'm healthy. But I did that for such a long time that it's interesting how much the body can actually take, and
Right.
how much during the progression, how you slowly get not just more dependent, but you need more and more to find those feelings. So, at the end, it was an indescribable amount.
And of course, that's a more accurate picture of what an addict / alcoholic looks like than the one that we first described, right? But of course, the first description is what is the picture of everyone's, that's what people see in their mind. They see overdoses immediately. They see you're homeless under the bridge, brown paper bag. And it's actually mostly people that are successful, gainfully employed, haven't lost everything, are in the midst of, doing positive things. They're from the outside looking in, and oftentimes, like the majority of cases, people are struggling with addictions and or alcoholism, but you don't necessarily know it unless you're looking for it.
Yeah, I don't know the statistics anymore because that doesn't ring my bell, because I love helping people as much as possible. But what you're saying is true. It's not a perfect picture of what it looks like. It doesn't matter race or creed or gender or how much money is in the bank. And it's this famous expression, it's the penthouse to the park bench. We come in, alcoholism addiction has, no prejudice,
Right.
zero. And so we come in every shape and size that you could think of. And that was what my daily usage looked like at the end.
So from the family perspective, what do you think going on with your wife and what she was observing? Does she understand what's happening after she goes to bed?
The show was pretty good, and she knew something was wrong with me. She didn't exactly know what. The drinking was an easy thing to point out because alcoholism is, at that time in 2006, just more digestible to point a finger at. Pharmaceutical pills, if your dad is taking something and your mom is taking something, and if anyone's taking something, it would go under the radar a little bit because you couldn't quite tell, like, is that normal? Is that not normal? Unless you saw the amounts I was popping. But the drinking was a red flag. But it was my behavior, and it was how dark I was getting without it, and how much I was craving it, and how much I needed it. And it really became the major source of tension between our marriage. And on top of that, marriage is marriage. So
Right.
a lot of the other things that also had to be addressed weren't being addressed just because we didn't have the communication skills, and we didn't have the therapy or the knowledge to know how to really grow together, let alone I'm an alcoholic and an addict.
Right. So in July of 2006, that first, the first 2 weeks of July, what's going on in your life around then?
Yeah, that's the beginning of the end, brother. That's the beginning of the end. Alcoholism and addiction took over. My daughter is about to be 6 months old, and I'm completely lost. My grandmother had died about a year before. She was the closest person in my life. She had died in my arms.
Hmm.
And I went through some sort of psychosis in which I was going really dark. And it was almost like it's almost difficult to describe, I'm trying to really find a word, but it was like being taken over. It truly was like a spirit almost had taken over me. And I just saw black. Nothing in the world made sense. Nothing. Like my favorite sports rigged, politics full of shit. What's next? Another new car, more money, another, like a bigger house. It was like, is this all there is to life? And there were suicidal thoughts. There were thoughts of just disappearing one day and starting my life over somewhere. It was truly like being possessed. And even drinking, I couldn't find that, when it stops working, it's even scarier. And the only thing I knew then to try to make it work was to do more of it. Like, I obviously need more. So my emotions were up and down. My body was going up and down. I was losing control of my body, which was my mask and my blessed, shield of armor and my vessel. And now I couldn't, my eyes would roll in the back of my head if I had too many Xanax, or I'd start sweating if I had too much amphetamine. Like, I couldn't control my body anymore. I couldn't keep it up. And my wife and I got into a terrible argument, not physical, but really all the emotions just poured out. And she called me out on my stuff. And I just lost it. And I just said, if you can do better, go find better. I had it. I had it with not just her, I'd had it with the world. I had no God in my life. I had no real spirituality. And for 3 days, I went into what they call an alcoholic fit, which is, it's not throwing things. It's just, you just can't see any way out. And I saw no way out. And on the third day, I remember driving home, and again, just furious, just angry. And all of a sudden that feeling just lifted, and it was very weird. And all of a sudden I'm driving, I was like, why am I so angry? Like, what am I angry at? And after the anger left, the exhaustion came. And I went home, and Christopher, I passed out, and this was very early. Like, I just passed out. And when I woke up, my wife at that time had been planning an intervention. And when I woke up, you have to press the security numbers to get out of the house. And so she knew I was getting up and going out. And this is like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And when she looked out, she saw me run to my car to take another Xanax and Ambien and whack it back with an Amstel Light so I could go back to bed. And she knew at that time we're doing the right thing. And the very next day was my intervention.
So was the planning for the intervention going on, you think, at the same time that you had the argument?
Yes, 100%. Everything was, it was the perfect storm. Everything was happening at once.
Yeah. Okay.
And to be honest, although we're no longer together, she would tell you it was my daughter that was the saving grace for both of us. Because one, she was going to protect her no matter, she probably could have gone on a couple of more years without a kid. I was just a maniac provider, but she was going to protect that little girl no matter what. And honestly, for me, without that little girl, I may have had enough spit and fire in me to be like, there's nothing wrong with me. It's all of you guys. You're all a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
So my daughter was really a saving grace from God.
What I like that you said there too, which is, I like it because I'm an interventionist and I come from this kind of perspective, but like you're saying, she could have gone on for a couple of more years. You didn't say you. right? It's so what the family goes through also, it's like, when is the family going to come to terms with, I've had enough? You know, we oftentimes are talking about the alcoholic or the addict and that they need to hit bottom. And from my perspective, it's more about, when is the family going to hit bottom? When is the family going to say, I've had enough of what's happening here? And oftentimes what winds up happening is they just, you know, like especially in relationships, and if kids aren't involved, that just, we're going to, you know, we break up, we leave, I'm not going to do this anymore. And that's the end of it. But in certain relationship dynamics, when kids are involved and they're just that sense of obligation, I'm not going anywhere, or especially with parents, obviously with children, it's like, my kid is struggling, they're not giving up, you know, like, it is what it is. However, if you identify that it's addiction, you identify that it's alcoholism, and then it's like, I've had enough of this continuing in the way that it has, that oftentimes is what winds up being the turning point for us, right? Because I'm sure over that time frame, for you, you were probably having moments of clarity where you were saying, I don't want to do this anymore. I stop.
Yes,
right.
100%. 100%.
Right. And that never translated to anything until your family showed up. So can you tell me what happens when you come to the following morning after the Xanax and the Ambien and the Amstel Light and everybody's in the room, and how that goes?
Sure. Well, I go to work like a good boy and get a great day of business and we get some great orders in from Victoria's Secrets, and it was a great day of business, because that part of my life never suffered.
Right.
And my former wife said, hey, look, after work, can you meet me at your parents' house? They want to see the baby. And I'm like, yeah, sure. Didn't think anything of it. Drive to my parents' house. I'm welcomed by their housekeeper, which felt a little weird. But I was like, okay, well, maybe everyone's with the baby. And she starts walking very slowly with me down the hall. And, you know, it was odd because I was like, I know where I'm going. Like, don't worry. And it just, everything felt, there was a chill in the air. And all of a sudden, this strange man comes up and meets me halfway in the hallway, and he's lit up like a Christmas tree. I mean, this guy is just larger than life. And his name was Michael Walsh. He was my interventionist, and still we're very close to this day. He's like an angel that came into my life. And he starts calming me down for something that I don't understand why. Right. He started calling me down. I'm like, I don't. And all of a sudden I walk in and everyone's sitting in a circle. And he says, do you know what this is? And it was before the TV show. And before I said, not really. I think I know what this is, but not really. He says, well, just please sit down and listen. And everyone's going to read a letter to you. And just know that I'm here for you. And he kept saying, I'm here for you. And as we sat down, I'm like, I don't even know who this guy is. You're here for them. You're not here for me. You don't even, like, just New Jersey, I'm right, you're wrong. What are you talking about? But letter by letter, my family was breaking my heart. And, you know, it started with something beautiful about me, something wonderful about me. And then like an, oh yeah, we know. And mentioning exact memories of either driving with my nephews drunk, or driving over a mailbox, or falling down on an airplane, and then another something beautiful about me. Right. And will you get help? And, you know, I just wanted the pain to stop. Like, just please stop reading these letters. But everyone had to read a letter. And at the end, I was like, yeah, God, please, and enough. Like, whatever you want, just stop. Yes. But once I had said yes to accepting help is where the work really began. Because then my interventionist, Michael Walsh, saw my disease come out. Because he literally beamed of light. And he starts going, oh my God, this is great. Well, we have you go in the Hanley Center, and that's where I went, and it's 28 days, and I see you're very healthy, and 4 times around the lake is a mile. We have a healthy menu for you. They have a gym. You know, he's like selling me. And all I heard was, Christopher, 28 days. That's all I could hear was 28 days. And I was like, well, like time out. 20 days, that's a month. That's a month. And all of a sudden, my people pleasing, my protection, my vanity started just coming out in spades. Like, where are we going to say I was for a month? Who's going to run the show for a month? Who's going to run the business? What are they, meaning everyone in the outside world, going to say about me? So I'm not even worried about everyone in the room now. I'm worried about what's my image going to look like out there.
Mhm.
I care less about the people in the room. And he calms down. He's calming me down. And I was just so defensive. And I just couldn't wrap my head around 28 days. So he goes, well, okay, what about this? What about if we go for 10 days and just see if you have this thing? And he literally said like that. And I didn't know what this thing was. I had no idea. But 10 days, I could, 10 days, I could say I'm taking time off to be with the baby, or I'm running the company in New Hampshire. I could marinate my brain a little. I can massage it, kind of go, okay, 10 days I could shut them all up and do 10 days.
Yes.
And then the moment happened, and it's July, and I'm thinking, it's hot. If you've ever been in South Florida in July, it's hot, it's humid, it's hurricane season, it rains every day. It's disgusting down here. You do not want to be in Florida. It's the worst, the worst. So I'm thinking, a really good time to do this would be like December, January. It's gorgeous in South Florida. It's around the holidays. We could say I'm doing this and that. So I'm ready to like negotiate when we're going to do it. And I'm like, okay, so when do you want to go? And he said two words that I could not understand, Christopher. I'm an intelligent guy. And he said and he said, right now. And I said, right now? And he said, right now. And I went, right now? No, right now. And I went, right now. And it was like a ping pong. You could literally watch my family just like it went on for 2 minutes. I could not process what the hell this guy was saying. And and I'm like, what about the dog? And my wife was like, we walked the dog. I'm like, what about the baby? What about the come? And it's a very humbling experience when everybody in your life loves you so much that they say they don't want you in your life anymore, and it's taken care of.
Yeah.
And my head works very strange, and I had a movie come up in my mind, and it was a scene from Goodfellas when he's like, okay, take me to jail. And those were the exact words I said out loud. I was like, all right, take me to jail. Yeah. And the journey began. And that's how I saw rehab. I saw rehab as prison. And then I had 10 days to get out on early probation, right? To be a really good boy. And they're going to see in these 10 days that there's nobody more dedicated and disciplined and determined than me. And probably by day 5, they're going to be like, there's nothing wrong with this guy. Yeah. It's got to be the family.
Now, before we launch into that part of the story, right, from your coaching background now, and I know that you've experienced some various different like mentors and different things that you've gone through and Tony Robbins events and things like that. What role does right now play in the decision-making process for clients that you work with and just anybody that wants to achieve any kind of goal? Is right now not one of the most critical elements when we talk about making a decision to do something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's nothing like the present. There's nothing like the present. One of the things with me is, especially when I'm coaching, is I make that as attractive as my interventionist did, but I also don't want to work with anybody that is not going to take that moment seriously. And I give them the time to be all in, because to really get your life on track, you could start from scratch. You could start below. You could start in the negative. But you do have to be all in. Other than that, once you start debating and you start negotiating it, good luck. You know what I mean? So I can start way below zero. I don't care where to start, but you got to be with me. I don't want to sell you. Yeah. I don't want to sell you. You got to want this, because we're going to take the journey together. This is not me up here and you down here and I'm telling you what to do. It's a flat road, right? And we're together on this flat road. The only difference is I'm 19 years up here and I know where the landmines are. I know where the booby traps are. I know when to make a left. I know when to make a right, but we're doing it together. So I've let every client know, you're Michael Jordan and I'm Phil Jackson. We go to practice every day. You're not practicing on your own. We go to practice every day. But in reality, you're the one on the court.
This isn't the first time I've been compared to Michael Jordan.
Yeah, I understand. I let every client know that's the truth, and a lot, especially a lot of my elite clients, or the famous one, like I let them know straight up, there's not a lot that I'm going to be able to add to your game. You already have the tongue out, you already have the dunk, you already have the fadeaway, you already have you already have the mid game. Your game is pretty much developed, but you don't know how to win.
Mm-hmm.
You just don't know how to win in life. Keep making a mess, and that's going to be my job. We're going to make decisions together, and you're going to know when to do certain things, when not to do certain things, when to stay on the court, when not to stay on the court, when to pass the ball, when to keep the ball. And I speak to them in that kind of language, so it takes away the actual pain of what they're going through right then and there. And since we're not talking about the actual problem, they could see it healthier and clearer. They don't feel like they're naughty and they're being put in the corner.
Yeah.
And that's really how I meet my clients. But I do need them to understand that this is the moment.
Right.
This is the moment.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what I like in that intervention decision too also, right? That you're being brought to this decision point. And then as soon as that decision gets made, and now we're going to take an immediate action. And here it is. We're going to do it now so that the ball gets rolling, right? So I have a framework that I'd love to see, like you can press back against it maybe even, or push back a little and see if it, works for you. But one thing I explain is the sobriety equation. And it's the equation on how people get sober. Now, first off, we have to delineate between getting sober and staying sober, that there's a difference between those two things, right? Everything that's about staying sober is where a lot of the conventional wisdom kind of plays in. But getting sober is the part where when we're in active addiction, or when that person's like in that deep struggle and they can't see it the way that, like we're the last ones to know. Well, if we're the last ones to know, then there's others who are the first ones to know. There's other people, like more and more people know. Meanwhile, we don't. So getting sober, this is the equation on how people get sober so that they can have the opportunity to stay sober, right? And so it's a moment of clarity plus an opportunity for recovery times positive leverage. That's how someone gets sober. And so for you and for all of us, anybody that struggles with active addiction, from what I've heard, well over 1,000 people surveyed, a moment of clarity is happening for us all the time. We're constantly waking up with moments of clarity. They're frequent, but they're fleeting. And again, we can't do anything about them. We can say we want to do something, but we can't capitalize on it because we're in active addiction. So when the opportunity for recovery gets added to the mix, the way that Michael Walsh showed up, here's your opportunity, right? What gets you over the hump and what gets you through how is this going to look to everybody? All the stuff with the business, and 28 days, how are we going to do 28 days? And he works through all that stuff. The reason why you agree to go right now is because of the positive leverage that your family just presented. All those wonderful things that they just said, all of the things that, were positives, but then also the examples that they gave, right? It's like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And, I've been listening to people tell their stories for 24 years now. And in hearing it, like that's how it gets done. It's my story. And if you take out one of those elements, it doesn't happen that day. So if your family doesn't get together with you and Michael Walsh and having the opportunity, do you think there's any possibility that you would have gotten sober that day on your own?
That day? I don't believe so. I don't believe so. What I really love is when somebody, like when you're like push back if you want to. I would never, because remember, we're all individuals, and that framework could be very attractive to people, and it could be those are the specific people you help. It has been my experience that there's numerous ways, and even from white light experiences.
Oh, sure.
Right,
yeah.
Right. So what I really believe is there's not one way. And if that, Christopher, that's your magic power. Like that's what's going to attract people to you, that formula. You don't change it for anybody. You don't change it for anybody because that's who you're going to draw into you.
Yeah. Well, and that's me breaking it down for the families so that they can see that there's a way to structure this if someone they love is struggling, that
Beautiful.
These are the pieces to put together in order to get them started. What happens on the other side? See, so this is the other piece of the puzzle, and maybe you'll be able to speak to this because I'm sure something happened in that 10-day window that you agreed to, you don't know for certain if when you get your loved one through the door marked help, that they're going to have what I call the moment of epiphany. But that's why you're getting them there. You're getting them there in the hopes that a moment of epiphany is going to take place. So that's the final piece of the puzzle. The sobriety equation gets them there. Hopefully where they are provides help that they need that's particular enough to them that they're going to have some kind of wake-up call, that something is going to click and they're going to go, oh my God, I have this thing. And so was there a moment of epiphany for you?
Oh my God, man. Not one. It was one after the other. It was nonstop. Mm-hmm. It was nonstop. It was me reading the doctor's opinion in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous my first night in detox. And then the next day when my counselor met me and was in shock that I read the doctor's opinion, and me not understanding why he was shocked, because explaining it wasn't like I had room service and I could watch the Lakers game. There were 3 books there. There was Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, and a 24-hour prayer book. I've done tons of drugs. I was never going to touch anything that says narcotics. Mm-hmm. I wasn't that religious or spiritual at the time. So I picked up the Alcoholics Anonymous. I heard of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I thought it was a book written by a bunch of drunks. And it was almost like a hero's journey. And in the end, they figure out how to drink. And it wasn't that at all. So a lot of the other chapters didn't seem that attractive to me. To the wives or the agnostics or, the family afterward, or none of that seemed, but a doctor I could trust, a doctor. So I read it. And I told him, and he was just in awe. It was like he was looking at Neo, and he's like, well, what do you think? And I'm like, I think there's a lot of me in there. He had me pretty down pat.
What did they have? Yeah. What was it that jumped out at you?
It's so much, just that the manifestation of an allergy, the obsession, the mental twist, that we could be very successful, that we've been known to go on the wagon many times just to come back, and to come back more ferocious. I mean, it just over and over again, the languaging was me to a T. Mm-hmm. And he looked at me, he goes, would you say you're an alcoholic? And I've never been so offended in my life. I was like, take it easy. And he saw it. He saw it. And he goes, well, let me just ask you one thing. He goes, let me ask you this question. He goes, it's 2 parts. He goes, have you ever woken up in the morning and sworn to yourself that you're not going to drink that night, but you end up drinking anyway? Now, Christopher, you got to remember, I got to get out of this place in 10 days. Mm-hmm. All right. So I think there's cameras all over me. So I got to be honest, thorough, and as disciplined as I can be. So I tell him the truth. I'm like, every day this happens to me. Every day I wake up swearing I'm not going to, and I do it anyway. He goes, okay. And he goes, do you ever make an agreement with yourself when you go, okay, I'm going to drink tonight, but I'm only going to have 1, 2, or 3. But then when you start, you can't stop. And I'm like, every single time I start, I go in with the idea of 1 or 2. And then before you know it, the night it's on. He goes, okay, so let me ask you this. If you wake up in the morning, you swear to yourself that you're not going to drink, and you end up drinking anyway, but then you make a deal with yourself that you'll only drink 1 or 2, but when you start, you can't stop. He said, would you say you were powerless? And brother, I couldn't find any wiggle room. It was like his rookie to my knight, his pawn to my bishop. It was checkmate. And I was like, yeah, I guess I'm powerless. And then he goes, would you say your life is unmanageable? So, dude, I crossed my legs. I start combing my goatee. I start thinking about, I just got the new car. The house is fully paid for. We have no debt. There's money in the bank. I got a kid. I got a hot wife. And he sees me analyzing my life, and he slams on the table loud. And he goes, Adam, you're in rehab. And I look down, and I notice I'm wearing slippers, and there's crayons on the table. And I'm like, yeah, I guess my life is unmanageable. And moments like that happen every single day. Yeah. And then when I was introduced to God, that was the main day. And on day 9, I had to tell my story in front of these 30, 40 alcoholic addict maniacs. I remember the first time they said, what's your story? And I was offended because of where I grew up and how I grew up. And I'm like, I never heard, no one talked to me like that. I'm like, what's my story? What's your fucking story? What are you talking about? What's my story?
Right.
No, to rely on you. You have a story. You have a story. You have a story. You have a beginning, a middle, and end. You have a childhood. You have when you were introduced. Like they started explaining to me that I have a story. So I had to share my story in front of these maniacs, and I do it. These guys stand up and start applauding and woo, Adam, and hugging me. And oh my God, I was the skinny kid and I was the fat kid. And oh, you went to Arizona State because it was the #1 party school. I went to Ohio State and I got a DUI. I mean, every single person identified with me, and it shook me. It just shook me. And that night I had my spiritual experience, which for me came in the form of a panic attack. It wasn't a white light. And my blood pressure went way over 180. And I freaked out, and they brought me to the nurse's station, and I was bright red and sweating. And they asked me point blank, like, what's wrong? And I told them the truth. I'm like, I'll tell you what's wrong. I think this is real. I think this is real. I think everything you're teaching me is real. I think this alcoholism addiction. I think this inner child work. I think I'm an alcoholic. These 12-step meetings you're taking me to make the appropriate phrase with the appropriate emotion. Like everything. I think it's real. That's what's wrong. I think it's real. And they're like, so what's wrong with that? And I'm like, I told everyone I was going to get out in 10 days. I'm like, I told everybody I was going to be out of here in 10 days. And they're like, go, just call your wife. I'm sure everything's going to be okay if you stay. They're laughing.
Yeah.
They give me a paper bag to breathe in. I had never been so offended in my life. I had never been so, but it worked. I was like, give me one of those Xanax or Vistrols or whatever you have back there. And they're like, no, this is your moment. Like you may have admitted you were an alcoholic and an addict, but now you're accepting it. Like, this is your moment. No more pills for you. I ran to the phones. It's like 5:15, 5:30 in the morning. I call my wife. She has no idea what's going on. She's nervous as can be. She thinks I got stabbed or something. She doesn't know what's going on in a rehab center. And I said, I have some really bad news for you. I said, are you sitting down? And she said, sitting down. She's like, you woke me up. She's like, I mean, you woke the baby up. She's like, what the hell is going on? And I said, listen, I'm an alcoholic and addict, and I have to stay. And all of a sudden, Christopher, there was just silence. And then you heard, like the laughter. And I was never going to come pick you up. I was never going to pick you up. Don't you see? It's you. It's Adam this and Adam that. And Adam needs his tequila. And Adam needs to go to work. And Adam needs to go to the gym. And Adam. And something happened to me in this phone call that they described called the parallel process, which I literally saw two of me. I saw it like a movie. It's very difficult to describe. And one of me was listening and then got back on the phone and was like, okay, listen, bitch, get in the car, pick my ass up, get the divorce papers ready. You have no idea what you're in for. Just this, I'm right, you're wrong, angry, revengeful alcoholic addict. And this other guy, I could not see clearly. I didn't see if he did a vow of poverty. I didn't see if he wore robes. I didn't see if he got baptized. I didn't see if he wore a yarmulke. I didn't know anything about this guy, but I knew he was sober. And I jumped into that guy with both feet, and I never looked back. I never looked back. And what I thought was prison turned into spiritual camp. And these 40 alcoholic addict maniacs turned into friendships. Everything changed in a moment, just a moment.
Yeah. And so then everything that happens after that now, that is the staying sober journey. Yeah. And, we don't have enough time to launch into all of the various different things, but when you were successful in business, you leave there, and then at some point you've come to this place where you decide that you're going to help people in the way that you do now, with coaching and all of that. How is it that you came to that place? What inspired that?
It was a very interesting mix of events. I got sober through a 12-step fellowship, and I dedicated my life to it. And over one day at a time, 1 month at a time, 1 year at a time, I was highly sought out to help people on their 12-step journey. And I started what we would call sponsoring, not just locals and people around town, but very high-end established people from Hollywood and A-list and athletes and people in government. And I loved it. I loved it. I also was running the #1 lace manufacturing company in the world, family business. I was third generation. And when that business, so this is 15 years in the journey, I'm coming up on 19 years. When we decided to sell and liquidate the family business. I didn't really know what my next steps were in my journey, but I also didn't know what my next steps in the journey. And I asked my mentor, like, what do I do now? And he's like, you're finally going to be Adam Jablin. He's like, you're finally going to be Adam Jablin. And I didn't know what that looked like, and I didn't know what it meant. And my wife and I were going through a very difficult time. The family business was the center of everyone's life, and now that's being gone, and everyone's identity has to be reformed. But I had a gift for this, and I started my coaching, and it took off, and I was really grateful. But then along that journey, I realized I have certain skills in a lot of areas, but there are more skills to this. And I get introduced to Tony Robbins and his old world and him, and I start learning under some of the best and realizing there's way more information out there than I realized. Mm-hmm. It's not just business, and it's not just taking care of your body, and it's not just alcoholism and addiction. There's a whole world of information, and I dove into understanding and learning more. And what I realized was all of it comes together. All of it comes together. If it's personal development, if it's spirituality, if it's 12 steps, if it's Christianity and Catholicism, if it's Judaism, if it's Buddhism, if it's business, it all comes down to one major ingredient in the middle. And I took the best of the best and formed through my own personality and my own structure, started helping people, and just kept rolling. That's what I'm doing now.
What would you say is the main ingredient to all of those modalities and pathways?
Love. The heart. It's the heart. It's all about love. It's all about love. From the disease of alcoholism addiction to the ego to drive and ambition to a lot of these are head-centered. And, as a matter of fact, even in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it does state, the disease is centered in our mind, right? So I'm using that reference point because of your podcast, but I would use different reference points on another podcast. And really, when you can come from your heart and not your head, that's really the main difference. So let's go back to the Jordan thing, just to make it so like pretend I'm speaking to a client. Michael Jordan had a clause in his contract called the love of the game clause, or the love of the game clause. And that clause said he can play wherever he wants, whenever he wants at any time. Meaning the Chicago Bulls cannot say, it's off season, you can hurt yourself. Every other player did not have that. He'd have a pickup game whenever he wanted. He could play wherever he wanted because he loved the game. And since he loved it, and since he was true to it, and since he played from his heart and not his head, he played because he loved the game. He didn't play for the sneakers. He didn't play for the money. He played because he loved the game. He got all of it. He received all of that because of his love for the game. He's considered the greatest of all time. But he's somebody that I can use because sports is neutral. But you can go one by one, be it religious stories, business stories,
sure,
one by one. And it's all about, if you really have that love and it's really in your heart, nothing can stop you.
Yeah. And I think from, a family perspective and seeing someone who is struggling with addiction, and just us personally, right? Like, it's almost like that love gets, co-opted. It gets captured. It gets stolen, right? It's a synthetic solution for us that we mistake for, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. This is the way that I'm going to live my life. And it might make me feel loved. It might make me feel connected. It might make me feel a part of. It might make me feel confident in all those various different things. And then, of course, slowly but surely, it takes all those things away. Gradually, sometimes, quickly. But the point being that motivation, that desire, it's within us all, right? I've seen some of the things that you've said, obviously, in following you for a time, that we can take those drives, we can take those things that, where alcohol or drugs was on the other end of it, and we can get that aligned with a higher purpose, aligned with something that's going to call us forward. And if your loved one is struggling with an addiction, it's there. The thing is within them. It's evidenced by the fact that they're stuck in it. And so if we can just get them aligned in a different way, that everything that they need is within them now.
100%. Look, because you can't love somebody enough to stop, because when the disease takes on, I didn't love anybody any less. I love everybody more than they could ever realize. I loved them so much.
Right.
I needed what I needed because I needed, like, taking away alcohol and drugs was taking away oxygen, and I needed to breathe. I needed to be able to breathe. And when it was really described to me in very layman terms that, I had a spiritual relationship with alcohol and drugs. Like, it was spiritual, man. It wasn't like, oh, I like chocolate, or, boy, I could quit smoking cigars or whatever. It was spirituals. Alcohol and drugs gave my life meaning and purpose. My life meaning and purpose. As a matter of fact, where I grew up in Jersey, it wasn't called a liquor store. They used to call it fine wine and spirits. Like, spirit, it's, in the Bible, it's spirits. It does something to your spirit. So I had a spiritual relationship, and I had to change that spiritual relationship from alcohol and drugs to what people would either call God, what 12-step moves they call a higher power. This is all up to you, those language, but I had to change that spiritual relationship. But the whole thing was about love, feeling loved, giving love, feeling connected, wanting to be connected. The whole thing was about love.
Right. Yeah. And I've also seen from your materials, what I see is enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And when I went to a date with Destiny myself some years ago, and that was my number one value that I came walking away from that event was enthusiasm. That so long as I'm enthusiastic for what I'm doing, and that's, purpose and meaning. And that's what, this all became born out of, me doing, everything that I do now is I'm just enthusiastic about this process, enthusiastic about families presenting that opportunity for recovery, because it's my understanding that we're not seeking that opportunity on our own if we're in active addiction. So I want as many people to have the shot at that as possible. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this talk with me. This was, fantastic. And how do people connect with you?
It's very easy. I made it simple for myself because it's a new world. So it's Adam Jablin anywhere on Instagram, where you'll find me talking back. Also, I have a team. So if it's my website or if it's other social media platforms, just look up my name, Adam Jablin, and we'll get back to you very quickly.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate you. And Thanks. I'll talk to you soon.
Good times. Good stuff.